The city was caught between sunlight and shadow when the first rumors began to spread, whispers that Deacon Sharp and Dr. Taylor Hayes were no longer a quiet secret, but a couple unafraid of being seen. Their friendship had evolved slowly at first, through late-night conversations over coffee and confessions about regret and redemption. Both had been haunted by their pasts, Taylor by the guilt of choices made and lives broken, Deacon by years of being the man everyone warned their daughters about. Yet together, they had found something gentle, something neither of them had dared to believe they still deserved. When they appeared together for the first time in public, it was at Il Giardino, Deacon's restaurant, on a Friday evening bathed in warm light. Taylor's laughter carried across the room like something fragile and new, and Deacon, standing beside her, looked lighter than anyone had seen him in years. For a moment, it felt like a small miracle. The criminal and the psychiatrist, each scarred in their own way, somehow finding grace in one another. To anyone else, it was a story of second chances. But to Sheila Carter, who watched from the shadows outside the restaurant window, it was nothing less than betrayal. Sheila had loved Deacon, or at least she had believed she did, in that obsessive way that turned affection into possession. He had been her partner, her confidant, the one man in Los Angeles who hadn't turned her in or run away. For months, she had built her fantasies around him, the outlaw and the outcast against the world. She believed they were bound by something no one else could understand. Seeing him smile at Taylor, that smile, the one he once reserved for her, broke something deep inside her. The glass of wine in her hand trembled until it slipped and shattered at her feet, mirroring the crack that had just opened in her mind. At first, she told herself it was nothing. Just another disappointment, another betrayal she would learn to live with. But Sheila had never been a woman who could live with disappointment. Within hours, her thoughts turned dark, her emotions like wildfire with no direction except destruction. Taylor Hayes had stolen what little peace she had managed to build, and in Sheila's fractured logic, that meant she had to pay. Meanwhile, Taylor was unaware of the storm forming in the distance. Her relationship with Deacon had become a quiet refuge from a world that never stopped demanding her strength. With him, she could be vulnerable, laugh freely, and stop performing the role of the perfect healer. Deacon, for his part, was finally beginning to believe he could be a good man. He found in Taylor a kind of belief he'd never received before, not pity, not condescension, but genuine understanding. "You've changed," she told him once, touching his face with a gentleness that startled him. "You don't have to prove anything anymore." And in that moment, he believed her. But happiness in Los Angeles was always temporary. Hope Logan, Deacon's daughter, was the first to notice something was wrong. She had seen the look in Sheila's eyes the night she came to the restaurant uninvited, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Hope warned her father that getting close to Taylor might provoke something he couldn't control. Deacon brushed it off at first, trying to convince himself that Sheila had finally moved on. But deep down, a quiet dread began to settle, a dread that would soon prove justified. Sheila's jealousy was not the loud, impulsive rage of a woman scorned. It was cold, calculated, and patient. She began to follow Taylor, learning her routines, the morning jog through Malibu, the afternoon sessions at her office, the quiet dinners with Deacon. Every detail became fuel for the plan forming in her mind. She would not just take away Taylor's peace, she would unravel everything she loved. And to do that, she would strike at those around her, people whose pain would hurt Taylor most. Her first target was Finn. Sheila's son had never forgiven her for the chaos she brought into his life, the pain she inflicted on his wife Steffi, and the scars that still lingered in their marriage. But in Sheila's mind, Finn was still her child. His rejection had always been a wound she couldn't stop reopening. Now it became part of her revenge. If she could make Finn suffer, Taylor would suffer too. Sheila began sending anonymous messages, cryptic warnings that someone was watching him, that Steffi's safety was in danger. At first, Finn dismissed them as spam, but as the messages grew more personal, mentioning places and conversations only he and Taylor could have known, paranoia began to set in. He confronted Taylor one evening after dinner with Deacon, demanding to know if she had told anyone about their family matters. Taylor, shocked and hurt, swore she hadn't. But Finn's trust had already been shaken. The small fracture Sheila had wanted began to widen. Then came Hope. She was Deacon's anchor, his reason to stay clean, to stay on the right path. Sheila knew this. And so, she began to haunt Hope's world too. Small things at first, a car parked too long outside her home, a note left in her purse with a single word, betrayer. Hope tried to ignore it, not wanting to worry her father, but when she found a photograph of herself and Deacon pinned to her office door with a red X over Taylor's face, she finally broke. "She's back," she whispered to Liam that night. "Sheila's back, and she's coming for all of us." Deacon's world collapsed in on itself. He confronted Sheila outside the restaurant a week later, his voice shaking with fury. "You're not doing this," he said. "You're not hurting them because of me." Sheila's eyes glistened with a mix of pain and madness. "You think you can just replace me?" she hissed. "You think that woman understands you better than I do? She'll leave you like they all did. And when she does, you'll come crawling back to me." Deacon stepped back, realizing that reason would never reach her. "I'm not coming back," he said quietly. "Not ever." Her face twisted into something unrecognizable. "Then you'll watch everything you love burn." Taylor tried to stay calm when Deacon told her what had happened. But she knew Sheila too well. This wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. Together, they went to the police, but without evidence, there was nothing anyone could do. "You don't understand," Taylor told the detective. "Sheila doesn't bluff. If she says she's coming, she means it." Over the next few weeks, tension thickened like fog. Taylor began locking her doors at night, checking every shadow twice. Deacon moved between protectiveness and guilt, haunted by the feeling that his love had painted a target on the people he cared for most. Hope, terrified but defiant, refused to leave town. Finn and Steffi tightened security at their home. Yet, despite every precaution, it felt like they were waiting for something inevitable. And then one night, the inevitable came. Taylor had stayed late at her office, finishing notes for a patient, when she heard the sound of glass breaking in the hallway. Her heart raced. The lights flickered once, then went out completely. She reached for her phone, but before she could dial, a voice echoed from the darkness. "You stole him from me." It was calm, almost whispering, but it sent chills down her spine. Taylor turned slowly, her flashlight trembling. "Sheila," she said. "You don't have to do this." But Sheila's silhouette was already moving closer. "I gave him everything," she said, her voice rising. "And you, little Miss Perfect Therapist, you think you can fix him? You can't fix what you never understood." Taylor took a cautious step back. "You're not losing him," she said softly. "You're losing control. That's what you're really afraid of." For a moment, there was silence. Then, unexpectedly, Sheila laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "Control," she said. "I lost that a long time ago. But I can still take it from you." What happened next unfolded too quickly to process. There was a struggle, a flash of light, a scream, and then footsteps retreating down the hall. By the time Deacon and Finn arrived, alerted by a security call, Taylor was shaken but alive. Sheila had vanished, leaving behind nothing but chaos and fear. The police searched for weeks, but she was gone again, like smoke. In the aftermath, the families tried to rebuild some semblance of peace. Finn urged his mother to leave the past behind, though he knew she never would. Hope stayed close to her father, wary of the shadows that seemed to follow them. And Taylor tried to go back to her patients, to her work, but she could never quite shake the feeling that somewhere out there, Sheila was watching, waiting for the right moment to return. Deacon became quieter after that night. The lightness that Taylor had given him was still there, but tempered by the knowledge that love in their world always came with danger. He stood by her, protective and unwavering, yet haunted by the thought that Sheila's obsession was not truly over. And he was right. In a small motel on the edge of town, Sheila Carter sat by a window, watching the city lights flicker like dying stars. On the table before her lay a photograph of Deacon and Taylor, smiling, unaware. She traced her fingers over their faces and whispered, almost tenderly, "You think you've won. But you've only just begun to lose." Outside, the neon sign buzzed, and the night stretched endlessly ahead. In Los Angeles, love was always a dangerous game, and Sheila Carter had never been one to walk away from a game she hadn't finished. The city's rhythm never truly stopped after Sheila Carter vanished. Days turned into weeks, and Los Angeles moved on with its usual parade of glamour and scandal, yet a strange unease lingered beneath the surface of every conversation that mentioned her name. In cafes, in Forrester's design studios, even in Deacon's restaurant, people lowered their voices when speaking about her, as if saying her name too loudly might summon her back. Taylor Hayes tried to pretend that life had returned to normal. She went back to her patients, back to her calm tone and steady advice, but her nights told a different story. Each time she closed her eyes, she heard the echo of Sheila's voice in that dark hallway, the hiss of broken glass, the terror of seeing the woman she had spent years trying to diagnose suddenly appear as a living nightmare. Deacon stayed by her side as best he could. He repaired the smashed glass at her office himself, insisted on new locks, and even bought a small alarm system she never used. But even he could feel it. Sheila's absence was not peace. It was preparation. Deacon's restaurant, Illinois Giardino, became their haven. There, amid the clinking of wine glasses and the smell of baked garlic and fresh basil, they could pretend to be normal. He would cook while she read her notes or teased him about how he still called his old recipes criminally underrated. But every so often, Deacon would pause mid-sentence, glance toward the window, and the air between them would change. Taylor would follow his gaze but see nothing, only shadows shifting under streetlights. They were both learning that healing was never linear, and ghosts never truly left. Meanwhile, Finn and Steffi tried to rebuild their home after the near collapse that Sheila's return had caused. Finn was grateful for his mother's disappearance, but something in him couldn't rest. It was a strange thing, grieving a woman who had tried to kill you and yet was still your mother. Some nights he caught himself wondering if she was alive, if she still thought about him, if she still believed, in that distorted way of hers, that what she did was love. Steffi tried to silence those thoughts before they could take root. "She's gone," she told him again and again. Let her stay gone. But deep down, she feared that Sheila's kind of gone was never permanent. Hope Logan had her own reasons to be uneasy. Her relationship with Thomas Forrester had finally begun to stabilize, but the unease that surrounded her father had bled into her life as well. She worried constantly about Deacon, his temper, his guilt, his tendency to fix things by running toward the fire instead of away from it. When she stopped by Il Giardino one evening and saw him holding Taylor's hand over dinner, she smiled but felt the sharp sting of déjà vu. She had seen love turn to disaster too many times in this town to trust peace when it lingered too long.
And she was right not to.
Because somewhere outside Los Angeles, in a roadside motel painted the color of faded sunshine, Sheila Carter was already building her next act. The news reports had declared her missing, presumed dead after a car was found burned beyond recognition in the desert, a car registered in her name. But Sheila was not the type to die quietly. She had orchestrated her own disappearance with a precision born of obsession. The woman in the morgue was not her. It was a stranger wearing her jewelry, the final piece in a puzzle she had designed to convince the world that she was gone. Now alive and hidden, she sat before a small television, watching a local entertainment segment that showed Taylor and Deacon laughing at a charity event. Her hand clenched around the glass she was holding until it shattered. It wasn't just jealousy anymore. It was humiliation. Deacon had promised her once that she wasn't like the rest of them, that he saw something human in her when everyone else saw a monster. And now he stood smiling beside the woman who had always represented everything Sheila despised: righteousness wrapped in sympathy, superiority disguised as compassion. Taylor Hayes had once told Sheila she could change. Now, she would learn what it felt like to be punished for believing in change. Sheila began to plan. Not the kind of impulsive violence that had defined her past. This time, she would be methodical. Revenge, she realized, was most satisfying when it came dressed as justice. She started small, sending letters from anonymous addresses to Forrester Creations and Spencer Publications, cryptic warnings about betrayal and buried secrets. They were just fragments, but they set off old suspicions and reopened old wounds. Rich Forrester accused Bill Spencer of using Deacon to undermine the family, while Brooke blamed Taylor for reintroducing chaos into their lives. The tension between the families reignited like a dormant fire catching the wind. And in the middle of it all, Deacon began to unravel. His restaurant was vandalized one night, graffiti scrawled across the back door. "You don't get to forget me." The handwriting was jagged, almost childlike, but he knew it instantly. He didn't tell Taylor at first. He didn't want to see that familiar fear in her eyes again. Instead, he cleaned it up himself and told Hope it was probably a random act of vandalism. But guilt eats quietly, and by the third incident, a broken window, a missing delivery truck, he couldn't hide it anymore. When he finally told Taylor, she reacted with the calm of someone who had seen too many crises to panic easily. "You can't protect me from her by pretending she's not real," she said softly. "We face this together." That night, they went to the police again, but as before, there was nothing concrete to act on. The detective's voice was polite but weary. "Without proof she's alive, Dr. Hayes, there's only so much we can do." Proof came 2 nights later. Hope was walking to her car after a late meeting when she saw a woman in the reflection of a storefront window. Just for a second, she thought it was her imagination. But then she turned and saw her. Sheila stood across the street, half her face hidden beneath a scarf, eyes gleaming in the neon light. Hope froze. The traffic between them roared, horns blaring, but she couldn't move. When she blinked, Sheila was gone. The call she made to her father that night was barely coherent. By the time Deacon and Taylor arrived, Hope was trembling, clutching her phone like a weapon. Deacon's first instinct was disbelief, but the moment he saw the fear in his daughter's eyes, he knew. "She's alive," he whispered, as if saying it aloud could somehow make it less true. From that night forward, nothing felt safe. Taylor started seeing patients virtually, afraid to leave the house. Hope hired private security. Finn and Steffi fortified their property, determined not to let Sheila come near their children again. Deacon, caught between guilt and fury, began to blame himself. "She wouldn't be doing this if I'd handled it differently," he said one night, pacing the living room. "I should have seen the signs. I should have stopped her." Taylor grabbed his arm. "You didn't create her, Deacon. You just cared enough to believe she could be better. That's not a sin, it's a tragedy." Sheila, watching from afar, relished the chaos. She had always been a master at turning love into fear, and now she was doing it again. But as she planned her next move, she underestimated something: how much Deacon had changed. When he finally caught a trace of her location through a credit card trail, he didn't call the police. He went alone. The motel was quiet, its lights flickering like dying fireflies. He found her sitting by the window, just as she had been weeks earlier, staring at a photograph of him and Taylor. "You can't keep doing this," he said. His voice was tired, not angry, almost pleading. "It's over, Sheila. Whatever we had, it's gone." She looked at him for a long moment before standing. "You think you can just erase me?" she said. "You think that woman can love you the way I did?" "I don't want the kind of love that kills everything it touches," he said quietly. For a heartbeat, she looked almost human. Then her face hardened. "You'll regret choosing her." Sheila slipped past him before he could stop her, vanishing into the night once more. When the police arrived, all they found were fingerprints and the lingering scent of her perfume. But that night marked the end of something in Deacon, the illusion that he could ever truly escape his past. The days that followed blurred into quiet vigilance. Taylor stood by him, refusing to let fear reclaim her life. Hope tried to rebuild her sense of safety, and Finn vowed to protect his family no matter the cost. But they all knew that somewhere out there, Sheila Carter was still watching. And she was. From a safe distance, she kept her eyes on them, their routines, their laughter, their fragile peace. The part of her that still loved Deacon twisted with envy, but another part, colder and more calculating, began to wonder if there was a better way to make them suffer. Maybe she didn't need to attack them directly. Maybe she could turn them against each other again. After all, that was how she had always survived, not by brute force, but by planting the right seed in the right mind and letting human nature do the rest. One night, as she drove through the desert, she whispered to the dark, "You think the story's over, Taylor Hayes? It's just beginning." And somewhere in Los Angeles, as Deacon and Taylor stood on the balcony of the restaurant that had once been their sanctuary, a chill passed between them, not from the wind, but from a feeling neither could name. The feeling that the past was circling back, patient and inevitable, waiting for its chance to strike again. The next chapter of their lives had already begun, its pages inked not with love or forgiveness, but with the quiet, creeping promise of Sheila Carter's return.